Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons is the newest DC animated film coming from Warner Brothers Home Entertainment. It's also animated in CG, not 2D like we're used to. I'm Chainsaw Reacts. This is my review for Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons. I do want to thank Warner Brothers Home Entertainment for sending me an early copy to review for the channel. I have some thoughts. Let's get into it. To start off with a positive, I had a great time watching this film. I think it did great on its action, some overall good storytelling, and I like the characters overall, and I feel like it definitely was worth the watch. With saying that, I do believe this film would have benefited with having 10 or so more minutes added to it, because once we get into the second and third act, the pacing doesn't stop, the story doesn't stop, and that's fine, but I felt like they could have used a little bit more time, especially in the first act, and maybe within to the second act, to maybe develop more in terms of Jonathan and Damian. Now, to be completely honest, Jonathan Kent is realistically the main character of this film in terms of screen time, character development. Now, don't get me wrong, Damian Wayne does get screen time. He does get some development in this film. But in terms of setup, in terms of the character you're really paying attention to the most and seeing the development over time throughout the film, it's really more Jonathan Kent, less Damian Wayne. I just wish it was more balanced because it is a Super Sons film with both of them working together. Their dynamic, of course, Jonathan and Damian being the way it is, it really worked because they're complete polar opposites. But it really was more a Jonathan Kent film, and Damian is kind of there because it felt like at times they're like, well, you know who Damian is, so we don't have to really explore too much of this character. Like, they do a little bit, but not a lot, and unlike Jonathan with a lot more detail and expanding upon this version of Jonathan Kent, it felt like a Damian, you already know this character. I wish they didn't approach it that way, because if they would have spent more time on Damian setting him up than what they actually gave, then it would have felt more balanced as a Super Sons film. Now, with me saying that, I'm not saying that this film falls apart, because in my opinion, the film shines because of how much time Jonathan and Damian actually spend together in this film, especially in the second and third act. Because if they waited till really late in the film for them to actually start working together in terms of the story that they're telling here, then I think this film would have been not a failure, but it wouldn't have been as good as it is, because you're promoting Super Sons, you're promoting them as kind of being in the forefront. And so they really give a lot of time with that. But in terms of the setup getting to the team up part of the film, which is roughly about halfway or so in the film, that's where I wish they would have done a little more development so that we get to that point and it makes, a better impact. But I think overall, it still works. I don't feel like it's a spoiler because it was shown in the marketing and it's on the cover of the film. Starro is the villain of this film. And in terms of having a high impact in terms of the world, Starro is the right choice in terms of villain because we're affecting everybody in terms of the story here in regards to Starro. Now, Brainiac would have been a great choice as well, but in terms of focusing on the sons, Damian and Jonathan, Starro I think was an interesting choice, especially the opening of the film, and it really ties into the rest of it. Now, jumping into the decision to make this film CG animated versus 2D, I think was interesting. I think it looks and works best, in my opinion, when it's a nighttime setting or in the watchtower where it's darker. The shading and everything and the coloring and everything looks better when it's darker. Obviously not pitch black, but you get what I'm saying, like when it's darker settings. But when it's like just broad daylight, really lighted settings, it looks okay. Like, it doesn't look bad, but I feel like it just works better because it feels like they put more detail into the shadows and into those darker colors. I feel like it just worked better with that color tone versus really broad daylight where it's really bright and everything. Like I said, it didn't look bad. I just feel like they could have maybe, lowered down the intensity a little bit because it just looked like, wow, it looks great in these darker shots. And over here where the sun's shining and everything, it's great. And there's some cool visuals, especially in the sky and everything. But they could have maybe worked a little bit more on that in terms of the brighter stuff. The action, as I knew, would be great because I feel like overall with these DC animated films, they know how to handle action. I feel like those are always good. Sometimes they can be iffy, but I feel like in this film, they did a great job with the action, and I didn't really see any major hiccups from them. Like, that looked kind of odd, or that looked kind of strange, because of course we're going CG versus 2D here, but they always know how to handle action. There's some great action, especially in the third act. I won't say exactly what, but there's a really cool moment with Jonathan and Damian teaming up. It was a great action sequence on the Watchtower, and I really, really enjoyed it. Now, I'm not going to say what it is because it's a major spoiler, but when you watch the film, you know what I'm talking about here. There is something, a decision, if you will, in the third act that is made that I was quite shocked by because I'm like, they're going that far with it? Interesting. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I was quite surprised and shocked that they're willing to go that far, and the story's willing to go that far in terms of they're willing to go to that place to make this choice because they feel like they need to. Obviously, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I was quite surprised. Like, oh, like that's a pretty major decision, and it surprised me. I'm not sure why. Maybe when you see it, you'll go, "What are you talking about?" Like, it just doesn't hit you that way or whatever. But for me, it did. Now, I feel like a broken record when I talk about the voice acting in these films, but I will say this on top of everything was fine because I feel like everything was pretty good in terms of the voice acting. The voice actor for Superman, I feel like maybe he could have did maybe a little bit of a lighter voice. I'm not really sure. Like I feel like we could have done something more than just having this really low voice in a sense for Superman. I just felt like they could have had something a little bit more going on. And Troy Baker voicing Batman just put me back to the Telltale series Batman games. I'm like, there's like because I didn't realize he was actually voicing Batman until I was watching the film. I'm like, oh, he's voicing him. Okay, interesting. But Jonathan and Damian all did great. I feel like everybody did a pretty good job, especially the voice for Starro. Like, that was pretty crazy. Now, earlier I mentioned how I felt the film could have benefited from more time in terms of a longer film, like 10 or so more minutes. I also felt like they could have used more time to develop more of this world because it's really focused on Jonathan, and understandable. Superman, Clark, Bruce Batman gets some, Damian gets some, but I feel like all the other characters that are in this film, besides focusing on Clark, Lois, and Jonathan, Bruce, and Damian, all these other characters get some like stuff or nothing at all. They're just kind of there. And I feel like we could have done more to set up this new continuity, this new world, because it just felt like, okay, we're just throwing in characters just to have characters. And it was cool to see them. It was great to see them because I know these characters from the comics and everything. I could recognize that character, that character, that character. But did they really need to be in this film? Like, did they actually make an impact besides just being in a scene? Not really. I feel like they could have done more to set up this world besides the little things they did. But maybe there are plans to do more films set in this continuity. And if that's potentially going to happen, I'm down for it because we've already now established Jonathan and Damian being a team in a sense. We've already seen all, like, some heroes, not a lot of heroes, but some heroes that are in this world, and there's potentially more out there that we just didn't see. So I could see them doing more films in this continuity if this is successful, and if they do, I'd be down for it. The final thing I'll touch on in this review is there are people that look at these films and say there's not a lot of depth to them in terms of there's not a lot to go off of besides action, and there's some story, but these films can be overall just mixed. For me, I enjoyed watching this film. Did I walk away going, holy crap, 10 out of 10, fantastic? No. Will I watch it again? Potentially. I feel like with these films that some really hit the mark in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, and here they're trying to accomplish setting up that these younger heroes, one of them not really being a hero, Jonathan, and Damian, who has a very different mindset than what Batman's trying to push onto his son, Damian. Damian and Jonathan, like, they are not prepared for this kind of thing, and they're trying to set them up as they're taking on a very viable and very intense threat. And I feel like they stuck the landing with doing that in terms of giving a very intense scenario with Starro and having them face it together in a sense and having to do all this crazy stuff. So they accomplished that. Does this film have a lot of layers of emotion and depth? Sometimes, yes, especially with Jonathan and everything. But for other things, it was just, this is a fun adventure. Fun, because how high stakes this is. But you get what I'm trying to say. I had a great time watching it, and I would definitely recommend it to people to give it a shot if you've been interested or if you're curious at all. I do recommend watching the film and judging it for yourself to see if you would enjoy it, because for me, I had a great time with it. So overall, Battle of the Super Sons has great action, some solid storytelling, more focus on Jonathan, which is good, but not much focus on Damian, which I felt like they should have done that. And more focus on the world, I feel like would have done pretty good for the film, and probably would have benefited for a longer run time, honestly. But overall, I was happy with what the film did, because they were giving us this fun adventure. Like I said, once again, fun adventure with the stakes that are going on. But I had a good time watching the film, and that's all I can really ask for, because I could have easily walked away going, Yeah. But I'm glad that I enjoyed it. So, what'd you guys think of the film if you've seen it already? And if not, let me know your hopes and anticipation for the film in the comments below. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace out.